is Fubara Eneli Esquire, author, Kwanzaa, A Celebration, host, Rethinking Freedom, co-host, Women and Resistance, and now added new co-host, Griot and Books. So a string of co-hosted. Welcome, sister.
A string of unpaid jobs. Thank you very much. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm fine, thank you. I'm fine, thank you.
And
Um,
welcome to everyone who's watching as well.
yes, yes. Welcome to our regular viewers and welcome to everyone. And unfortunately, Brother Milton Alimadi is not here. He is taken to another task and he should be back next week. That's it. News from where you at.
Well. Couple of things. First and foremost,
Mm,
we had a couple of elections
okay.
that took place. Sylvester Turner, who was a Democrat, passed away, and so his seat was vacant.
Vacancy.
And um, Greg Abbott had delayed the election, the special election, to fill that seat to keep the power in the hands of the Republicans for as long as he could. But finally, that special election took place, and Christian Menifee won that. He's a Democrat, so he
Okay.
defeated Democrat Amanda Edwards to fill that vacant seat. And of course, that narrows the Republican majority in the U.S. House,
Okay.
making it even more difficult for Mike Johnson, who essentially has eroded the power of Congress to check the power of the executive.
Mm,
And so that is good news for those who are still concerned about this dying, quote unquote, democracy in the United States. But
mm,
then something else significant happened also in our elections.
okay.
So, in Texas, they did this whole racial gerrymandering to want some. The convicted felon in chief reached out to Abbott again to
The
demand
reduce
5
seats. Yeah.
seats,
Yeah.
and they quickly acquiesced and met that demand. But in doing so, they also diluted seats that were solidly
Red.
Republican seats.
Okay.
And that has come back to bite them
Oh.
because there was also a special runoff for a Republican held state Senate seat in Tarrant County, which is in North Texas.
Okay.
And a Democrat won that seat.
Mm,
Taylor Remmet beat Lee Wamganas, I think is how you say her name. And now that seat is only open, that the person's term only has another 11 months, so there will be another election for
election.
it. So they get to redo this.
Mhm.
But in the interim, it is very noteworthy that a Democrat did beat a Republican in what used to be a solidly Republican seat. And
Okay.
so that may portend what is to come if the people go out and vote.
That's key. If
Yeah.
they use their, and apparently in Texas, last year, I was listening to a gentleman. I believe it was with the Get Out to Vote. He was saying 1.3 million Texans stayed away from voting. So
Yes.
imagine what would happen if.
And there's so many things that they've done. Texas actually has the worst policies and laws in terms of voting, in terms of access to voting.
Mhm.
Most of the things that were done in 2020 that ensured more access to the ballot box, they've rolled back all of those things. They've definitely have tried to impact mail-in voting,
Mm,
even people being able to do drive-through voting, especially for those who have any physical disabilities. And of course, we know and we strongly believe that ICE is going to be weaponized in Texas to help dissuade people from coming
oh,
out to exercise their right to vote.
Mm.
And so this is going to be an interesting state to look at in terms of what happens, but they might also suppress their own votes as they continue to try to racially gerrymander what's going on here. And something else that happened is Ken Paxton, who should be in jail, who had
That's
been
the Attorney
indicted
General.
for corruption,
Mm.
and went through an impeachment process. And despite all of the evidence that should have led to his impeachment, was let off by, again, the Republican majority.
Mm.
Attempted, well, he did go to court to try and prevent a Latino group from being able to get out the vote activities,
Oh,
and the courts just smacked that down and said that they absolutely had every right to carry on with their activities. And so we'll see how things turn out, but so far so good. But people, register to vote, check your registration, and please talk to friends and neighbors and convince them that they are not doing themselves any favors. They are not being revolutionaries by choosing not to vote.
true, true, true. Somebody said in the chat, there's an old adage that says when you dig one hole, you might as well take a shovel along and dig two.
Yep.
That's true. That's true. So
Yep.
anything on national level in the United States, I don't want to steal
Well,
you guys' thunders.
my understanding is that 3 million documents related to the Epstein files have been dumped. I will be honest with you, I have not gone to check out what these documents say. I've seen little things here and there about names that have been mentioned. What really stands out for me
Mm.
is that America has always harbored and even celebrated sex traffickers and human traffickers. We know that because most of us who are of African descent were human trafficked. We know that because when we check our DNA,
Mm.
um, while there were some consensual relationships, most of them were not consensual relationships.
Yeah.
And so this is baked into the DNA of this country. And while they did not do a decent enough job of redacting some
The
sensitive information related to the victims,
victims. Yeah.
they are still covering up the um the clientele, if you will. Who were all of these men and maybe women who were engaged in these acts against these young women?
Young
And
girls.
why is no one being, like, I have not heard of any investigation into anybody else. I know that the Congress, the Oversight Committee, Judicial Oversight Committee, is moving forward with their contempt charges against the Clintons for refusing to testify behind closed doors. They said they will testify, but they want to do it publicly. And so it's just interesting how this country continues to harbor the worst of the worst.
Mm.
And of course, Trump's name is all over those documents, and some very salacious things from what I have heard, but I have not really spent my time going through those documents.
Okay. Well, it's curious thinking that from initial find, I mean, obviously they've been downloaded in PDF files, and the initial assessment that is that his name appears in the documents 5,236 times. Let that
Oh
sink
well,
in.
but his lying press, what is her name?
Uh,
Carolyn, whatever her name is.
Karen
She
Levitt.
said that there are other people named Donald Trump, that there's a plumber named Donald Trump. So even if you see his name, it's not this Donald Trump. And even though they mentioned Mar-a-Lago, it has nothing to do with the felon in chief. Even though he
Wow.
said we grabbed them by their, because we
Yeah.
can't. It's not him.
Yeah. Okay. Oh well. So
And and
while
and so-called Christians in church today are still worshiping their golden calf.
whoa,
Yeah.
well, while that is going on, the world has sort of started to contend with the fact that the United States might have just stepped up the mantle, off the mantle of its grand empire. By that I mean, the UK Prime Minister was in China, hoping to build relationships with China, and from that we've got the initial assessment that China would be allowed to build its ginormous embassy in the UK, and by extension, Brits can now visit China visa free. So
And
the
I
most,
believe that simultaneously, United States of America is contemplating closing quite a few of their embassies across the African continent.
yeah,
Um, and Stephen Miller has said the quiet part out loud, which is that there should be a labor class, and those people should not have the right to vote and should not have benefits like any regular human being, which happens to um, arguments that were made by a one-time senator, I think Hammonds was his name, back in the 1800s, justifying slavery, justifying the enslavement of Africans. So here we are again.
yeah. Hey, I mean, somebody said it this week, and it was quite. It said history rhymes that George Washington and Donald Trump have a lot in common. And he
Absolutely.
said, he said he's got nothing to do with their governance. Let's just leave it at that. So that said, we go into our news review for this week, and the first news actually starts in the United States, and it's that Mr. Kennedy has decided we're going to turn African babies into guinea pigs. Excuse the porn. And so the first news comes from New York Times, and it reads: Kennedy plans to test the vaccine in West Africa babies is blocked. A planned US-funded study of hepatitis B vaccine drew widespread condemnation from researchers. Now the host country said it cannot proceed. The West African nation of Guinea-Bissau has suspended a controversial US-funded study of hepatitis B vaccine in infants there after an outcry from public health researchers over the ethics of the work. The study, which was supposed to be carried out by Danish researchers, swiftly became the subject of furor in public health world, with researchers in Africa and the United States saying that it violated key tenets of ethical science. A Trump administration health official said the study had been paused. International agreements on medical research in humans require researchers to offer the global accepted standard of care, in this case, vaccination at birth, to any participant in a clinical trial. So, what was your initial thought when you got this story?
My brother.
Mm,
I do not blame colonizers and oppressors for doing what they feel is in their best interest. You know, I happen to raise chicken who lay eggs. I have certain kind of wiring around their coop,
mm,
and I take other precautions because I know that it is in the nature of certain animals to be drawn to this chicken coop and to be drawn to the eggs.
sure.
If I leave them open and exposed, I cannot then be astounded at what a snake or a fox or, even a
A
raccoon
rat.
chooses to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know the nature of these animals. I'm not calling RFK an animal, although, of course, all human beings are animals to
Have
some.
inherent, yeah.
Yes. Um, with African countries, I believe there are 14 of them so far
Mm,
signing these memoranda of understanding with the United States of America
yeah.
to provide health services and so on and so forth in African countries. I'm just thinking, what are you thinking? Particularly with this regime, but really with any American regime, if you are in a subservient position.
Mm.
Because if RFK is willing to sacrifice American children, we have outbreaks of measles across the United States of America now.
Yeah.
We have children who are dying of diseases that they could have been vaccinated from and protected from. Why would you get into any kind of partnership with such an entity?
Mm.
And so it should not be surprising to any of us. And certainly when I read this, it's like, of course they did this.
Yep.
Of course they don't see us as human beings to begin with. And we know that Guinea-Bissau is a country that is struggling financially.
Mm-hmm.
They have a population of just 2 million people. We know that they have been, after being colonized by Portugal for centuries and fighting their brutal liberation war that went on till 1974. Some of you may know Amilcar Cabral,
Cabral. Yep.
and we know what happened to him. We know about the repeated military coups, or at least we should. That this is a country that presents not as much resistance to the United States of America. They probably did not feel that there would be anyone that would care, that they would identify 14,000 children in this place. And like you said, use these children as guinea pigs. So reminiscent of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, where you know that you already have medical evidence that if children are treated in a certain way, this prevents certain diseases. You intentionally deny them that treatment to see what happens.
Yeah.
But what we also know is that this is not the first time that it has been done. And unfortunately, if we don't learn, this will not be the last time.
Correct.
So basically what they wanted, so other times that this has been done, just to put this in some context, in the 1990s in East and Southern Africa with HIV/AIDS drugs, the US funded trials where African women were given placebos.
Yeah.
Even though effective treatment was already in existence, basically thousands of babies were infected and died because their parents, their mothers were denied effective treatment.
Exactly.
And the justification was, well, they wouldn't have had access to the drug anyway. So the fact that we gave some the drug and some we didn't, hey,
just balances itself out.
It's not a big deal at all, which is in direct opposition to the Declaration of Helsinki, right? Helsinki, rather, where they acknowledged that there needed to be one ethical standard for how we treated everyone. But apparently the world is showing there's one for Africans and there's one for everyone else. But of course, they do this with economics. They do this with everything else. We saw this again in 1996 with Pfizer. They had their Trovan trial in Kano. And what Pfizer did was they tested an experimental antibiotic on children during a meningitis outbreak. Parents were not properly informed. Some children died. Others were permanently disabled. The Nigerian government did sue Pfizer, but I couldn't till today tell you what that settlement was and how much of it actually reached
the victims.
No executives of Pfizer faced any criminal responsibility because no humans were involved. And of course, we saw that throughout the colonial era, medical experiments in Belgium, Congo, in French West Africa. We saw forced vaccination campaigns. Of course, we see Bill Gates every other day. He's coming up with some other thing that they want to try on our children.
Yep.
And it just goes on. And I could give so many other stories because Africans are biologically different. Our pain tolerance is mythologized. And of course, we see that here in the United States, whether you talk about all of the experiments gynecological experiments that were done on Black women,
Yeah.
of course, without any kind of anesthesia, because hey, we don't feel pain, and what does
Pain.
it matter anyway if we are in pain?
Mm.
And we saw that even with the vaccine testing proposals in 2020, where again French doctors were publicly suggesting that Africa be used as a testing ground
Testing ground. Okay.
for
Yeah.
COVID vaccines. So I say all of this, and then we see it with pharmaceutical dumping. We see it with environmental dumping. We've seen it with even the baby formulas that are dumped on Africa that have a very different formulation
Yeah.
than
Sugar
what,
content. Yeah.
yes, than what is served to children in quote unquote the developed countries. And so for me, with all of this, it's African leaders, we all have a responsibility to take care of ourselves.
Mm.
And we cannot abdicate that responsibility to other people because we have all the proof in the world that they do not care about us. I don't know if I need to do the Michael Jackson dance. All I want to say is that they don't really care about us, right? Um, and rather than take their money and their disease and everything that comes with it, let's turn inwards and heal ourselves and stop inviting death through the hands of these would-be saviors, because they are not coming to save us.
I mean, one thing I took from the story is, in tandem with the book we read yesterday, is that some of these ideas in terms of how to govern ourselves, we already have. But because we have lost memory, we seem to have just abdicated our agency to everyone else but ourselves. For one, we've got some of the most brilliant minds, not just within Africa, but also in the diaspora, people of African descent, that could help champion some of our medical needs. But for some reason, the white man's eyes is just way too colder. And in this case, the irony is it's even people outside that are championing the fact that
Yeah.
this is wrong.
Yeah, it was people outside because these were two Danish researchers
Yeah.
who have been roundly criticized by their own peers. They could not conduct this research anywhere else in the world.
Mhm.
But RFK linked up with them and was like, oh, I got an inroad for you. And while we're defunding all of these other universities in the United States in real scientific studies, we're going to put 1.6 billion or something towards this study, because again, these Black people don't matter.
Mm.
And of course, for those who want to go further with this, if you get the book Medical Apathy
By
um,
Harriet Washington.
yes, who really went into great detail about the history of medical abuse and experimentation and exploitation of Black Americans. But that same ideology is what we see being carried out across the African continent as well.
And one final thought on that. It's
Yes,
just
Peggy Miller brings up Dr. Sims.
Dr.
And
Sims, yeah.
it was just recently that his statue started to be torn down. But prior to that, he was, again, the way we venerate these absolutely vile human beings in the United States of America, he was lifted up as this great researcher and amazing human being, even though he had caused so much harm to so many.
Mm. And it's so one final thought. So how do you think we can, sort of decolonize this medical practice of allowing, quote unquote, clinical trials being done in Africa?
Well, first and foremost, I'm going to say, unlike the United States, where you have the head of your Department of Health not even being a physician, that it is important to put people in positions who have expertise, so that they even know what it is that they're reading and they understand the implications of whatever is coming across their desks. And sometimes across the African continent as well, we're putting cronies into positions who may not have the background to even decipher the information that they're signing, the documents that they're signing. So
More
that's
like
one.
the old colonial treaties
Yes.
where they didn't
Yes.
understand what
They
was
didn't
written.
understand.
Yeah.
The other thing is transparency. So many of our African governments are signing these documents, making these agreements without even the governmental apparatus knowing what these agreements are. And this is across this is with loans, this is with, all kinds of treaties, all of these memoranda that they're signing. And it's really imperative that there's some transparency, so
Okay.
that even if the 14,000 children, because trust me, they weren't going to be targeting the children of quote unquote the educated, the elites. Most of them actually probably don't get their health care in Guinea-Bissau. Most
Yep.
African elites travel outside of Africa to get their medical care. So again, it's going to be burdening those who are already so burdened. Maybe those who are not literate in that particular language or cannot read. And so it's important that we have that transparency, and it's important that, just like, people came out, and a lot of Black Texans came out and voted during these past elections across the continent. We must fight. The average Black person, the average African must fight for a government that serves them, and we must get out of office these elitists who are not looking out for the interests of the whole.
Okay. Thank you. And with that, we go to the next story, which comes from The Guardian.
And
And
maybe
it's
we should take down all the pictures of white Jesus.
okay.
No, 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 not being facetious. The reason I say that is there's a conflation between, well, Jesus saves,
Mm.
and every time a white person shows up, they
It's
are,
almost like, yeah,
yes, it's
embodying.
like they embody everything that you think about Jesus. And so
Mm.
you don't even scrutinize anything that they say or do, because, oh my God, they left the lap of luxury to come and care about the wretched of the earth. And,
Mm.
and we are just so grateful to them, and they just get a pass. And so someone can be digging ditches in America or anywhere in Europe, and then show up with white skin, and let them not have blonde hair and blue eyes, to Africa, and all of a sudden they can become a king or a queen, and all kinds of doors open up to them.
Mm.
This savior mentality and this idea of, you know a white savior complex is something that we need to get rid of. It's a virus in our minds.
Okay. And so we go to the next story, which is about the role of aid. Well, another white savior story. So it's from The Guardian. It's titled Action Aid to Rethink Child Sponsorship
You're
Plan.
not gonna give me any happy stories today. Like, bruh.
Well, I try to, but for some reason, you might you. I try to, but the Western media is not a friendly place when it comes to African stories. So this story reads: Action Aid to rethink child sponsorship as part of plan to decolonize its work. Development Charities' new co-chair signals shift from controversial sponsor a child scheme launched in 1972 to long-term grassroots funding. Child sponsorship schemes that allow donors to handpick children to support in poor countries can carry radicalized, racialized, and paternalistic undertones and needs to be transformed, the newly appointed co-executive of Action Aid UK said as they set out to decolonize the organization's work. Well, one of them, Ghazi, most of our supporters are relatively well off people, and many of them are white. And if you're asking them to choose a picture of a brown or black child and choose the country they come from, effectively, that's a very transactional relationship and quite a paternalistic one. We recognize the current child sponsorship model reflects a different time. Okay. Um, Let me preface that by saying, you remember when you switch on your TV and you see the child with flies dotted around their mark, dotted around their mark with extended stomachs, and they will say, if only you could give this child £2 a month or $2 a month. This child can basically be able to go to school, and you would have pictures from them on a monthly basis. Sorry, I just your thoughts.
So a song that is coming to mind right now, there comes a time
When they
when we
hear a
different
different
call
call,
and
when
the
the
world
world must
must
come
come together.
together as
No, really,
one,
listen,
there are people dying.
the image we have of Africa is so simplistic, and I get it. I get feeling, hey, what can I do as an individual? I get it because I once sponsored a child for about 3 years. And then, of course, at this time, we sponsor a school in Opobo in Nigeria where we're paying salaries and fixing up the school and all of that, where we're funding a library. So I get it. We want to make a difference. And I struggle even when I'm fundraising with how I present the need, because there's this whole narrative of us being poor and poverty stricken. And yet Africa isn't poor.
It's
If Comrade Alamati was here, he would say we're not poor, we're impoverished.
impoverished. Yeah.
And more than just um, giving alms, like we do here in the United States, where it's like, oh, okay, well, I donated to the food pantry, which is great. It's what if we actually paid people a living wage
Wage. Yeah.
so that they did not need to depend on the food pantry? But we almost like this sense of having people dependent on us because it gives us this superior
Yeah.
morality, this sense of, oh, and look at how benevolent I
I
am.
am.
And
Yeah.
I have to like check myself even in the work that I'm doing. And so in reading this, grateful that they are finally coming to terms with this, because again, we know that most of that money did not even go to the communities or to the children. They went to administrative fees. There were people
Chief
living really
executives.
large over
Yeah.
these donations. Um, but more than that, it's, can we stop the harmful policies that impoverish these areas so that those areas can actually thrive?
Yeah.
Right,
Mhm.
that is really what it is. So I have a friend who right here in my community who has a foundation that builds wells across different parts of southern Nigeria. And every time I go to one of her galas, and I love her dearly, and if she's watching this, don't hear this as a criticism. There are all of these really wealthy white people, and they're buying earrings for like $500 or whatever to make a
Mm.
difference for these people. And I'm like, and at the same time, you guys are voting MAGA. At the same
Mm.
time, you guys are voting to hurt people. At the
Mm.
same time, you are the ones with these backing policies that make it so difficult for these countries to survive economically. And so, like Malcolm X would say, if you stab me with a knife and you put it 6 inches in my back and then you draw it out 3 inches, am I supposed to turn around and start worshiping you and thanking you? The reason I even have a knife in my back in the first place is because of you. And so, thankfully, yes, they want to decolonize, which means to undo some systems and logics and the habits of domination.
Mm.
What they're going to create instead, let's see what that's going to look like. But what we really need is to advocate for real policy changes. And right now, I don't see any corporations that are pushing back against the policies of Trump's regime that are causing real harm. I don't see corporations that are saying, hey, how we're doing business is hurting these countries. I
Yeah.
don't see people pushing back against the IMF or the World Bank
Mm.
and all of these other investors with these draconian interest rates. And that's really where the change needs to happen.
Mm.
But I'm looking at, for instance, Ethiopia and what they were able to do with their dam. When the World Bank says we wouldn't fund it, even though it took them 14 years, they turned inwards and they found a way to do it themselves. Maybe all of these programs being dismantled and all of that will cause us to stop having our hand out and to look inwards and to figure out how we solve our own problems. Because we have what, 60% of the world's arable land is in
Right.
Africa. We can feed ourselves. We can take care of ourselves. But for all of us, as we do what we can to help Africa, please don't put yourself in that savior mentality. Africa is where it is because we have not fought for, or we have supported policies that have hurt Africa.
Mm.
And if we
Mm.
really want to help, even as you might fund, someone's education or fund a school or whatever, and all of those things are helpful, we really need to be pushing back against international corporations, against the US government, and for those of you who are listening internationally, against your governments and what they are doing to impoverish Africa and our communities.
Yes. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, they're very complicit because it's amazing how in 2020 and 2021, you had all of these corporations that were suddenly for
DI.
diversity and equity and
Yes.
inclusion. And boom, in the blink of an eye, those same corporations cannot wait to build a gilded ballroom. They cannot wait to turn back. No, now we're going to fire everybody, and white men have been discriminated against, and we're opposed to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Just like that. These people have no morals whatsoever. None.
Mm. Mm. There's speaking on the charity question, there is what do you say to don't laugh. What do you say to countries who have, specifically, I'm talking about the UK now, who has certain programs where they do like a telethon every year, and they have these phone-in programs, and they go to places like Africa, places like Kibera, and funny thing about that Kibera itself, it's the creation out of colonialism. You create one of the largest open air. I can't even call it a
Prisons.
no. It's a ghetto, but essentially it was because the Brits were the British were fighting the Kikuyus, and they needed soldiers to come in and help put down the rebellion. What did they do? They brought in Sudanese soldiers under the King armed rifles. They were called the King armed rifles, and they brought them in, but they won't allow them to stay in the European areas. So they stayed on the gun range. It's the gun range that then extended and created that Kibera, which is basically a ghetto. And so you see manifestations of history like that. And from time to time, Britain will organize charities that will go and then tell them that, oh, we're going to give them toilets in Kibera, we're going to give them medicine in Kibera, but without underscoring the problem of how Kibera itself came to be. So, what do you say to that?
I think it's just us lying to ourselves and trying to assuage our guilt,
Mm,
not really looking at how we are responsible for the very issues that we claim we're trying to solve. And again, it's this sense of, oh, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, so I am working harder than anyone else. As an attorney, unfortunately, I don't do evictions, but I've been in court a number of times where an eviction hearing has happened, before my hearing or something of that nature. And this is across the United States, but certainly where I live right now, if you are working a full-time job, making even $15 an hour, you cannot afford a two-bedroom apartment and a car payment, and you cannot eat 3 meals a day. It's
mm,
just you actually, you cannot afford a two-bedroom apartment. Forget car and everything else, and we don't have a decent public transportation
Transport.
system. And so people start, these are hardworking people. You're working 40 hours a week. Now, remember, minimum wage is not $15 an hour. So I'm almost, no, I've actually doubled the minimum wage. And so when we don't fight for those kind of things, when we don't dismantle the systems that are creating the problems, but then we turn around and say, well, I gave 10% of my tithe, or I gave this so I can get a tax deduction, or it makes us feel good when we're actually part of the problem, because we really do not want to fight for a solution. And I don't know if we do it because that makes us feel like we're somehow better than other people, or I'm not really sure. We might need to bring a psychologist on to explain the psychology of it all. But this is something that we see worldwide, where you see this even amongst friends. I want my friends to do well, but I don't want them to do better than me, or even as well as me, because I still need to feel that I'm somehow better than they are. And if they start doing as good as I am, or doing a little better, whatever my measurements are for better, then now there are issues in the relationship. Human beings, we really need to check this ego and to decide, what does success look like? What does it look like to really love one another? What kind of world do we want? Even as we set goals, it's still the beginning of the year, and some of us have set financial goals. I want to be a millionaire, I want to be a multi-billionaire, whatever the case might be.
Okay.
How does that improve the world? And maybe I'm thinking, well, if I have more money, I can do more good. Yeah, but what if money was more equitably dispersed?
Yeah.
Then maybe someone else isn't so impoverished that they're now dependent on me to even feed them. Maybe we all get to live in a 3-bedroom house, as opposed to some are homeless, and some of us have a first home, a winter home, a summer home, and then an Airbnb that we make money from.
A bigger yacht.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to, when you were talking about systems earlier, you mentioned some of the systems in the West also contribute to the problems in Africa. I'll give you one classic example.
Or all?
Well, let's just say, okay, some.
Okay, some.
Let's just say some. Okay, some. But these are two clear sums. Look at the agricultural industry in the United States. Heavily subsidized in the United States. Yes. Heavily subsidized.
Yes.
Heavily subsidized in Europe with a common agricultural policy. But let an African country try to subsidize their agricultural industry. They fear the blowback of tariffs and sanctions.
Yeah.
So you immediately then start importing food. Now, we talked about land being arable, but most of that land doesn't produce what people eat. They produce primary products
we have
for
to,
the
we
West.
have to listen. We have to produce flowers because Valentine's Day is around the corner.
Exactly.
People in the West have to give roses and all of that to show their love.
Yeah. You have to fresh flowers.
And we need the chocolate, because nothing says I love you like chocolate,
flowers and chocolates
and diamonds from African mines.
And there you go. And then one final one with the health issue. When the USAID was demolished at the beginning, gutted at the end of last year, I suppose to them it doesn't really matter, was that, to the Trump administration that is, was that the USAID impacted a group of people in the Southern Africa with regards to the AIDS epidemic. There was an issue that happened in the early 90s where grandmothers were taking care of babies, and Oliver, what's his name? Thabo Mbeki's government decided they were going to go to India to go and buy cheap intraviral drugs, which were going to be used to curtail the problem of the AIDS. With that program, they were also going to get the Indian pharmaceutical authority to create an industry in South Africa. Guess what happened? the pharma industry in the United States threatened to sue threatened to sanction the South African government. South African government then went to the United States to appeal to them. The climb down was, okay, don't worry, we'll augment your payments to the pharmaceutical industry by 60%. That 60% was gutted. And now the industry that would have been created as a result of that to produce the drugs in Africa were also stymied. There we go. So you begin to see the multiplier effect going forward, which is why when someone said in the chat that capitalism needs a subclass to survive, that is clearly the case. So the aid industry needs to not just decolonize, it just needs to go away. It needs to go away. And we need to take charge of our own agency. And as Thomas Sankara would say,
listen, I have a great idea for them.
Yeah.
How about they all start to rally for the IMF, World Bank, and all of these entities to cancel 100% of Africa's debt? No. Listen, Trump got to file bankruptcy. What, 4, 5, 6 times?
Mm-hmm.
You basically get to start over.
Yeah.
It gives you a chance to, okay, I made some mistakes, paid, okay, let's start over. How does Africa ever dig out of this hole? Think of your own, your personal finances.
Yeah.
If you make $100, £100, wherever it is you're living, 100, whatever your currency is, and you're spending 45% of that, so $45 in my case, on servicing your debt. Servicing means you're paying the interest. You're not paying down the principal. $45 of my $100 I made is just servicing my debt. I've not eaten. I've not put a roof over my head. I've not put on clothes. I have not taken care of my children. I have no health care, nothing. How could I ever survive? How do I ever dig out of that?
There comes the time when we hear the certain call.
So how about, no, seriously, just like they went and rebuilt, the Marshall Plan rebuilt Europe. Where has there been a Marshall Plan for Africa after colonization?
Wow, you mentioned the idea of Marshall Plan. For the Marshall Plan of Europe, guess what the collateral was to the United States? It was the colonies and the Caribbean. So that's so if you, I mean, the United States was not going to give Europe a blank check. The only person that didn't have something to stand up as collateral was Japan. I said the only people was Japan and Germany, but the rest stood up. Belgium stood up Congo. The United Kingdom stood up its African colonies. The French did likewise in Europe. So that's where and you can read about all of this in Vijay Prashad's book. What's it called again? Washington Bullets. It's called Washington Bullets. I believe it's on the chapter on the Bretton Woods Agreement. You will see it all there. The African colonies were actually stood up as collateral, which is why you have US companies being able to move in all African countries. You can't see French companies going to the British sphere of influence. Neither can you see the Portuguese going into the French. You can see the Americans is the only constant. And that was one of the key deals that they made at the Bretton Woods, part of the Bretton Woods Agreement. And one of the reasons why you have IMF, the World Bank, the UN, all headquartered in the United States. So, sorry to have to break that to you. But sometimes, all of these things are they're out in the open, but sometimes we just sort of look like, why do we have all of them here? Well, as someone said, if we pay you, we determine where everything else is. So,
And Thomas Sankara tried to say this years ago. Like Ciara is saying in the chat, if all of Africa banded together and said,
no, we ain't paying it.
we're not paying it, and we are going to put our heads together and figure out how we solve our own issues, how we make sure that everyone across the continent eats and it's taken care of, we can do it. But at this point, we're making these agreements left, right, and center with
I
people
mean,
who we
he
know
he.
do not mean us well.
The thing about Sankara was he was so clear and certain with what he said. I mean, it was the meeting was
And
July.
he said, yes, if
Yeah,
I alone say I'm not paying the debt, I'm going to be dead. Yeah.
and he was by
And he
October
was.
October 15 of the same year. So it goes to show that sometimes our ancestors actually know what it is they're talking about. So for the speaking of um, history, we go to the next story, which is I wish Comrade was here. He would love this. It's from his favorite newspaper, and it's it's from his favorite newspaper, the Financial Times, otherwise known as the Money Paper, which says Nigerian military officers face trial over alleged coup plots. Detainees accused of trying to overthrow Bola Ahmed Tinubu's government last October, and the a snippet from it reads: several Nigerian military officers are to face trial for allegedly attempting to overthrow the government of Bola Ahmed Tinubu in a coup last year. Nigeria's military said this week that following an internal investigation, a number of 16 detained officers who were arrested last October have been tied to allegation of plotting to overthrow the government. It is unclear how many of the detained officers who have not been formally identified stand accused of being involved in the alleged plot, which could have ended a quarter of a century of civilian rule. There is one caveat here, okay, which is rumors that the coup had been foiled were initially strongly denied in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, with the military claiming that the 16 soldiers had grievances that were tied to perceived career stagnation. On that note, what are your thoughts? Based on the history of the place.
I think you should share your thoughts based on the history of the place.
Okay, so when Nigeria got its independence from the British in October 1st, 1960, after about 4 stabs at it, initially the first call for independence was 1952. The North said no. Again, 1954. The North also said no. Then eventually, they agreed and decided, you know what, let's do it October. Let's do it October 1st, 1960. So the independence happened, but prior to that, the country had already been divided into regions. There were 3 regions initially. There was the northern region, the eastern region, and the western region, based on the fact that the British had this idea that this regionalization will allow each country, each region to grow at its own pace with minimal power in the center. Keyword, this is the key word here, minimal power in the center. When the coup happened January 15, 1966, the first thing that happened was Aguiyi canceled the regional arrangement and then centered the power in the center. In so doing, the coup that happened, although Aguiyi himself was not in charge, the 5 majors that planned the coup were from the eastern side of the country, but they were mostly based in the north. So people looking at that thought it was an eastern coup, and the rest, as they say, was the history. There was a counter coup July 28, 1966, where Aguiyi himself was captured, and the governor who he went to visit said, "You cannot take him without taking me." That governor was Adekunle Fajui. He himself was eventually assassinated along with with Aguiyi. And subsequently, there was Gowon came to power. Gowon himself would be overthrown July 28,
I
1975.
went to school with Gowan's son.
Yeah, so he would be overthrown July 28, 1975. The gentleman who came to power was one of the ones who planned the counter coup that brought Gowon to power. And he
Mhm.
was Brigadier Mohammed, Muritala Mohammed, who the airport was named after. And Nigeria's main airport is named after. He himself will be assassinated outside my primary school on February 13, 1976. His deputy, Obasanjo, would run the country until October 1st, 1979, when they handed over power. The military will return December 31st, 1983. That government that returned was led by Muhammadu Buhari. At the time, Muhammadu Buhari himself will be overthrown. At what's it called? Will be overthrown August 29, 1985. He would, I mean, all of this is just wow. So anybody that sees that would have seen that there is that history of military rule within Nigeria. And you get to say that the coup of 1966 would lead to the breaking up of initially of Nigeria into the declaration of Biafra, May 30, 1967. But that war went on for 3 years, and then it was eventually stopped January 1st, 1970. And all of that is, there's still the undercurrent of all of the ethnic nature of Nigeria's, what's it called? Of Nigeria's history. And so when you have military guys now trying to plot or attempting or being asked to plot, you will find that most of the coups in Nigeria have not been altruistic, except one. The only one that was altruistic, which everybody looks back on favorably, was that of Muritala Muhammad. Beyond that, everybody has just been a crook. All the military guys that
No, I liked it. Diabon. What are you talking about?
no. Idiagbon was, I mean, okay, yeah. So sorry.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, so
Diabon actually
Idiagbon,
did some good things for the country. Yes.
yeah. Sorry. Idiagbon. Okay, so but that was short-lived. So Idiagbon's
That was
government,
short-lived.
Government was short-lived. So why am I saying all of that? The politicians have largely been the most, how can I say it, the less patriotic when it comes to the country. The military has been, but in so doing, the military have also been corrupt. So you get a sense that
But I don't even know that you can truly make a distinction between military coups
no,
and
you
then,
can't. That's what I'm saying. That's the point I'm
because
making.
Obasanjo was,
Yes.
he was in the military, and then he came back
Right.
as a civilian and ran the
Yeah.
country.
Yes.
So yeah. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah. So all of that to say, and Obasanjo is also one of the most corrupt of them. There was
Hey, be careful. That's our babao.
no, he's one
Your
of the no.
farmer now.
Listen, he's one of the most corrupt amongst them. And you can, I mean, you could look this up. Nigeria was supposed to have a back to the what's it called? Back to the farm program in 1976, and the operation was tagged Operation Feed the Nation, and
Operation Feed the Nation.
Operation Feed the Nation. And the land that was demarcated largely in his area of the country, in Ogun State, he would eventually take it over. And guess what? OFN, which is Operation Feed the Nation, then became Obasanjo Farms Nigeria. So if that is not corrupt, I don't know what else is. So,
Well, I mean, if you're not tagging Trump and his coins and this new arch in the ballroom and
Mm.
playing and all of that is corrupt. We're just governing. What are you talking about? Anyway, carry on.
So, to bring it to a close, now you've
Mm,
got politicians who are afraid that the military might come back.
mhm,
And why wouldn't that not be the case? You've seen what has happened in the Northeast with Boko Haram. You've
mhm.
seen the incessant polluting of the Southeast with regards to the oil companies. You've seen the kidnappings all over the place. So the large sense of insecurity has led people to feel frustrated. And so they might just be looking forward to the military stepping back into the foyer. But I don't think also there is a huge appetite for it. For one, that is a long part of what used to be Nigeria's history, and I don't think we're cut out for your uh, Traores and your Saimo Guetas. We're not
Well,
Nigeria
you
is
know what? On this one, I would
no.
say that having lived outside of the country for so long, that
Mhm.
I'm not sure that I'm in a place to make that assessment, because I do know that people are desperate in
They
Nigeria,
are. Yeah, they
and that
are.
while there are, we don't have a middle class anymore in Nigeria,
Mm,
that
mm.
there are quite a few people who, quite frankly, will not care who is in power so long as there is an ability for people to feed themselves and some hope for the future. Because
Okay.
right now, our young people are languishing.
Mhm.
The corruption with Tinubu's, with the Wike and all of them, and I know some of you were getting into the weeds here. Um, it's so blatant.
Mm.
With everything that has happened in the history of that country, we have I in my to my knowledge, I've not seen a more corrupt Supreme Court than what we
Mhm.
have now in Nigeria, and what they did with Tinubu's ascendancy to the presidency.
Okay.
And I need to take care of myself because I do plan to go back to Nigeria, and I could get arrested for what I'm saying. My father has been arrested for saying less. So I do not need to kind of watch myself a little bit here. But what I'm saying is that when people are desperate,
Mm.
I'm not sure that there is not an appetite. Now, it's hard also for me to make an assessment on this because it has been so hush hush. We don't know, at least I have not been
What the
able to
details? Yeah, yeah,
ascertain
yeah.
the
Yeah.
names of these 16 officials. I don't know their ranks. And I don't know what their ethnicity is because, that always plays a
Always
role in
plays it
Nigeria.
exactly. Yeah,
So is
yeah.
this in any way tied to Biafra, to IPOB? Is this Northerners who are wanting to maybe impose Sharia law? Like, where is the opposition coming from? Or is
Mm.
it a conglomeration of different ethnicities that are coming together? So at this point, I don't have enough information to really speak intelligently at this point on this coup. But what I will say is, yes, Nigeria is ripe for change because what we currently have is not working.
Okay.
And yes, we are not. And I think that Tinubu knows that. And that's why they were so forceful in
Mhm.
going into Benin Republic to make sure that they quashed that coup there, because that was a little too close to home.
To home. Yeah,
Because
yeah.
if you have Mali, Niger,
Chad.
Burkina Faso, and Benin went that way, then hey, it would just
It
be a
was
matter
only
of
a matter of
time
time. Yeah,
before
yeah.
Nigeria as well. So
I mean, one sobering thought, then we move on, is
So let's.
uh,
Someone is asking, is there any comparison between Moritala's regime and that of Sankara?
yeah, I mean the
A little
comparison,
bit.
yeah, the comparison would be they were selfless. Both of them were selfless. So if anything,
And
Muritala
if
was
you're ever in Nigeria, you have to go to the museum to see. I actually took my children there to
to
see.
see the
They
car.
still have the vehicle that he
Yep.
was in.
Hmm.
Of course, not a vehicle made in Nigeria. It's a Mercedes Benz,
Yeah, Mercedes.
riddled with bullets. The
And
vehicle.
that was the last time he drove himself alone. He used to drive himself. Yeah.
Mhm.
That was the last day. He was supposed to go under, normally the head of states were supposed to be covered by security, but he used to drive himself around. And that was the day he was supposed to stop doing that, that was the day he got assassinated. Um, yeah, the sobering thought I wanted to leave you with was, you remember when Sonny Abacha passed on, June 1998? He passed on June 1998. Colonel Major General Abdul Salam took over power. He handed over power in May 25, May 25, yeah, May 25 of 1999. So essentially, maybe about a year. In that 1 year, Nigeria's foreign reserves went from 27 billion to 15 billion US dollars a year. So that alone, the military, exactly, yes, wow. The military nobody wants that. Not at this point in time.
Yeah, but what are our reserves right now under Tinubu? Where our
Well,
debt has almost tripled,
I mean, but
and we have nothing to show for it.
that's a combination. I'm
And then
talking
even
about
just even what you just said now, that our reserves have to be in US dollars. Oh my God.
yeah, but
Let's
that's
move on to the next topic.
because we sell our oil, and our oil is held in USD. So
Hopefully BRICS rises up and can help us change some things quickly
oops,
here.
oops.
Yeah.
Okay, for our final story, and yes, for people who first time here, if you're finding value, please do like, share, subscribe to the podcast, and yes, we
Like
continue.
and share.
Like and
Yes.
share,
Spread
yes,
the good word.
yeah. So the final story is out of Sudan. For one, we're not talking about the people, but we're actually talking about the memory of the place. So, according to Radio France International, there is a race on to save Sudan's plundered heritage as museums fall victim to war. In almost 3 years of civil war in Sudan, the country's museum has been ravaged, with thousands of its archaeological treasures looted and feared trafficked. Researchers in Sudan and beyond are racing to catalog and recover the losses, estimated at 110 million US dollars. So, what happened? The Sudan National Museum in Khartoum bears battle scars. Beneath holes left in its facade by rocket fire, a large bay window lies shattered. The gardens are littered with explosive, home to a vast collection tracing thousands of years of human history in the Nile Valley. The building was ransacked when paramilitary fighting the armed forces overran the capital soon after the war began in April 2023. One final part I wanted you to, okay, yeah. They completely ransacked the Kushite gold room, which housed hundreds of ornamental pieces. She said, necklaces and rings made entirely of gold, jewelry dating back to the time of the Kush civilization from the kingdom of Napata and Meroe, were found inside royal burial chambers. The museum held the world's most important collection of artifacts from the kingdom of Kush, an ancient Nubian culture whose pharaoh once conquered Egypt. It also housed objects that testify to the rich range of influences, including Islamic and Christian, that have shaped Sudan over its long history. Now, we read a book yesterday titled Pre-Colonial Black Africa. Chekate Diop was able to do his research based on the fact that there were artifacts to look at to be able to chronicle. What would someone in his shoes be able to do if they wanted to do a similar type research today in light of what has happened here? Over to you.
I'm glad that you did evoke Sheikh Anta Diop in his book, because of course we know this is not the first time that Sudan's history has been looted. And what we see happening in Sudan is also not actually even
Unique to Sudan.
unique to Sudan. We saw that those of us who were paying attention during the Iraq War, where they went in and they just decimated
The museum.
centuries of artifacts and information that, hey, nobody knows where it is, but it's in somebody's basement or private collection. It will show up years from now. It's probably collateral for some yacht or plane or maybe a spaceship that is going to Mars or something.
Mm,
And so we know that in the 19th century and early 20th century, that
mm,
European colonial expeditions removed Sudanese and Nubian artifacts for Western museums
yeah.
under the guise of scientific archaeology. We know that under Anglo Egyptian rule from 1899 to 1956, Sudanese antiquities were cataloged and interpreted through colonial epistemologies. We know that because, again, it's always about trying
Mm,
to paint Africa as this primitive place with no culture and no history. And what
correct.
they basically attempted to do was to sever Kushite and Nubian civilizations from African history. We know that these, having Sudan in this weakened state makes it very vulnerable to all of this illicit excavation and the trafficking. And so, again, anyone could have foreseen this that was paying attention. So the article in particular, as I was reading through it, notes that the Kushite gold room that
Mm,
housed artifacts from Napata and Meroe were completely ransacked.
that, yeah.
So this is probably not just someone who is like, oh, some
They
soldier
were
who doesn't
told
know
to
what
order.
they're doing. Yes. Someone knows what they were doing and is very actively taking these items out. But the kingdom of Kush directly challenges this whole Eurocentric idea
Mm,
that Africa is peripheral to world civilization.
vision, yeah.
And so, yes, if you gut it and we don't have any proof or evidence of who we are, any physical evidence that Africa produced any advanced states or any mythology or architecture or whatever, it's easier to continue to carry on these stories that we then imbibe and believe, hey, we are an inferior people. And so we should always be grateful for whatever the white man can come in and share with us. So
Mm,
now, looking at the RSF, and we've covered Sudan and the RSF on numerous occasions on this show. Um, who are they, and what are they about? And I don't know if you want to fill us in again on that, Adesoji, because RSF was never about. There is a distinction between the Arabs
mm-hmm.
and the Black Africans.
Yeah.
And they were never designed to protect Sudanese society, and certainly not Black Sudanese, right?
Yeah,
And
correct.
so you just have to wonder what is amiss here beyond the fact that these are valuables that
Mm-hmm.
people can make money from. It's
Mm-hmm.
also the erasure
Yeah.
that is very concerning to me as well. um Museums should be neutral spaces. They should be places that are protected, even in times of war.
The
They are
war. Yeah.
places that affirm continuity. But when you do that, we're talking about memory and what
Mm,
happens when a people have no memory. If you have no memory, then you have no history,
history.
right?
Yeah.
You have no history, you have no sense of yourself, you almost have no future.
Future. Yeah,
And
correct.
so we should be very concerned about what's going on. Who are we going to get support from? Who's going to care? That's the question.
Mm,
Where are we go? Who's going to help fight this on the international level? Who is going to point out when they find these stolen artifacts and care about returning it?
mm,
And is there even a Sudanese government in place that will say, yes, this is worth preserving,
wow.
depending on whether that government is headed
By
by
an
people
African?
who yes, a Black African, or whether it is by someone who is like, to hell with those Black people.
Mm.
So those who have no history, have no present, have no future. So we should be very concerned about our erasure in this way, through the erasure of our artifacts.
And it's funny that the story would come to light in February because February seems to be the month where the British did carry out a lot of expeditions while they were running their colonial projects. Many people would remember the Benin Empire that was ransacked, and most of it now sits in part of British collections, British Museum, for people to come and gawk at, you know. But
So what I would say to us, because I'm always looking for, okay, so what are the solutions here?
mm,
I've had the opportunity now to go to Kemet twice. And the first time I went, I was just overwhelmed and just in awe and kind of in la la land. The
yeah,
second time I was lot more deliberate, and God willing, if I get to go back again, I would be even more present. But I think us being very
intentional.
intentional about cataloging our own history,
Mm,
whether it's interviewing elders in your family or whether it's keeping your own memories. And certainly, like I have a doc actually I have a notebook from when my grandmother was part of an organization where they lent money to each other because
mm,
they could not get money from the colonial system, and they supported one another. And I have, where people would write in for what they needed the money for, and then the loans that would be given, and then when they would repay it, and so on and so forth. And I've kept that because it's proof of what we were able to do for ourselves.
okay.
And so all of us have a role to play in preserving our history and our artifacts, because if we don't, then we stand to allow others to erase us. And we are living history today, right? Our lives today will become the history of
History
tomorrow.
tomorrow, yes.
So accumulate what you can, catalog what you can. And if you're ever in these spaces where you can see these things, museums or whatever, take your own pictures, catalog, keep evidence of it, because we never know when we're going to need that to prove not to others, but to ourselves
Ourselves, yeah.
the essence of who we are.
Yes. Let's leave it on that positive note. With that, we've come to the end of this week's episode of African News Review. Just before we go, this Wednesday, we are going to be marking the first anniversary of Women and Resistance. We're asking people to come in and have sit with us with regards to any one of our subjects that we've spoken about and what we can do to improve women and resistance. We're happy to hear from you. Again, send me.
My mother said, "Don't call them subjects." So
Okay. The sisters who have led our revolution and help push back against what's the word? Help push back against what we've experienced.
imperialism.
So yeah.
Yes, yes.
So that's it. Sister?
I'm so grateful for this community. I'm grateful to you. I'm grateful for everybody. The chat has been blowing up today. I wish I knew your real names. I'm just looking at. I hope to meet all of you at some point in person. But thank you for us being able to just have these conversations and to think about these issues. And hopefully, we can get some of our younger people, more involved
Yeah.
and paying attention. One of the things that really hit home for me yesterday as we were going through the book by Shekanta Diop is that the education we receive should be put to use for our liberation. And, that man just followed his curiosity, but everything was geared not towards, can I get another letter behind my name, or can I get a new title, or can I get more money, but
Mm,
really about solving our own problems and figuring out how to liberate us. And when I talk to the young people in my life, it's like, how will you use your life in service to us as a collective? And so thank you so much for this forum and just this opportunity to delve into our issues, because it is sharpening me and helping me to make better choices with my time and my money.
No, thank you. No, I mean, thank you for coming through. Now you're co-host of three of my three of my thoughts. So, I mean, what else can I ask for? So, um, I
and
promise
and
not to come.
and
I
there will
promise
be
not to
no
come up with
more.
other ideas.
There will be no more.
Maybe one more, but I promise.
No.
Yeah. That said, until Wednesday when we come again to women and resistance, it's been a pleasure, being here with all of you again. We thank you all for coming through week in, week out. So another of our babies is marking its first year anniversary, which is Women and Resistance. So we see you all on Wednesday. Until then, it's good night and God bless.